Canada is considering an unprecedented response to President Donald Trump's looming tariffs on Canadian goods, which are set to take effect tomorrow, March 3rd. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has made it clear that his government is prepared to retaliate forcefully, even considering the drastic measure of cutting off electricity exports to key US states. The threat comes as tensions rise over Trump's plan to impose a 25% tariff on Canadian exports and a 10% levy on energy, a move that could have devastating effects on industries such as auto manufacturing, steel production, and retail. During a press conference on Monday, Ford reiterated his stance, warning that Ontario could halt the flow of electricity to states like New York, Michigan, and Minnesota, which heavily rely on energy imports from the province. If they want to try to annihilate Ontario, I will do anything, including cutting off their energy, with a smile on my face, he declared. His aggressive rhetoric underscores the gravity of the situation as Canada braces for the potential economic fallout of Trump's trade policies. Beyond energy exports, Ontario is also considering other retaliatory measures. Ford hinted at implementing a surcharge on each megawatt of electricity sold to the US, effectively raising costs for American consumers and businesses. He also threatened to terminate a $100 million deal with Elon Musk's Starlink internet company and ordered the removal of all American alcohol from the Liquor Control Board of Ontario stores should the US move forward with the tariffs. The economic implications of Trump's tariffs are profound, with many analysts warning of job losses and rising costs in Canada. And Ontario, as the country's industrial hub, is particularly vulnerable. The Progressive Conservative government has already earmarked over $40 billion in potential economic relief, including a $5 billion Protect Ontario account, tax deferrals, payroll subsidies, and direct support to municipalities. This preemptive economic shield highlights the gravity of the trade dispute and the potential repercussions for workers and businesses across the province. Despite these preparations, Ford acknowledged the uncertainty surrounding Trump's next moves, stating, "We don't know what's coming tomorrow. I'm not even sure President Trump knows what's coming tomorrow." This sentiment reflects the unpredictable nature of US actions under Trump, as businesses on both sides of the border anxiously await the official implementation of the tariffs. The federal government has also vowed to respond in kind, with Ford expressing his support for a dollar-for-dollar retaliation strategy, mirroring any US trade actions with equal countermeasures. While Ford stopped short of announcing specific retaliatory tariffs at the provincial level, his willingness to take drastic steps signals that Ontario is prepared to escalate if necessary. With less than 24 hours before the tariffs are expected to take effect, all eyes are on Washington and Ottawa. If Trump follows through with his threat, Canada's response could set the stage for a new era of trade hostilities between the two historically close allies. Whether this standoff leads to negotiations or further economic conflict remains to be seen. But one thing is clear: Canada is not willing to back down without a fight. As one of the world's largest economies, the United States remains highly dependent on imports across various critical sectors that sustain its growth and stability, from energy and raw materials to food, beverages, and skilled labor. International trade has long been a cornerstone of the US economic framework. However, during Donald Trump's presidency and his America First agenda, these trade relationships came under significant strain through the imposition of tariffs and trade restrictions on both allies and competitors, including Canada, the European Union, and China. The administration aimed to redirect trade in favor of domestic industries. Though this policy seeks to safeguard American manufacturing and aligns with nationalist sentiment, it often disregards the intricate global supply chains built over decades of globalization. The United States imports not only consumer goods, but also essential resources like crude oil, rare earth minerals, electricity, and other raw materials, crucial for industrial and technological progress. Additionally, international talent plays a pivotal role in maintaining the country's competitive advantage in innovation and research. In response to the tariffs imposed by the Trump administration, Canada is weighing countermeasures that go beyond traditional trade penalties. One major action under consideration is restricting oil and electricity exports to the United States, which could disrupt key energy supply chains. Furthermore, Canada is reviewing potential restrictions on other crucial exports, including rare earth elements. In 2024, the United States imported approximately $19.85 billion worth of energy from Canada, making it the country's largest supplier, which included 1.46 billion barrels of crude oil, valued at $16.8 billion, 271 billion cubic feet of natural gas worth $10.8 billion, 37 terawatt-hours of electricity valued at $1.85 billion, and 10 million pounds of uranium, worth $0.4 billion. Crude oil represented the largest share, highlighting Canada's key role in ensuring US energy security. Canada is diversifying its oil export markets, focusing on the Far East, including China and Japan, to reduce its reliance on the US with the completion of the Trans Mountain Expansion (TMX) pipeline in early 2024, aiding the redirection of Canadian crude to Asian markets. Alberta's energy exports to China surged significantly in 2024, with exports reaching $2 billion, a five-fold increase from 2023, and Japan has also become a crucial market. The US continues to rely on imports to meet regional and industrial demands, including crude oil, natural gas, petroleum products, coal, electricity, and uranium. In 2024, the US imported 6.1 million barrels of crude oil per day, with Canada providing 67% of total US imports. Canada also supplied the majority of the natural gas and electricity imports, essential for heating and industrial power generation. Although coal imports were minimal, uranium imports, particularly from Canada, played a significant role in fueling US nuclear reactors. With sanctions reducing imports from Russia, Canada's role in US energy security is becoming increasingly critical. Canada is considering strategic countermeasures in response to proposed US tariffs, including the potential halt of oil exports, which would have wide-reaching consequences. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has advocated for a balanced response, while Pierre Poilievre, leader of the Conservative Party, has vowed to retaliate if tariffs are enacted. Measures affecting the US economy, if necessary. PIV has also emphasized the need for diversifying Canada's trade relationships to mitigate the impact of US tariffs. Halting or reducing oil exports to the United States would have significant economic and political repercussions for both nations. For the United States, this action would disrupt energy supply chains and increase costs for consumers. States such as Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, which heavily rely on Canadian crude, oil, and electricity, would experience supply shortages and rising energy costs. These disruptions could ripple throughout the US economy, particularly affecting industries dependent on stable and affordable energy. For Canada, the economic effects would be equally severe. Crude oil exports represent a major revenue stream, and any substantial cut could slow GDP growth, increase unemployment in the energy sector, and place pressure on provincial budgets. Alberta, as the country's top oil-producing province, would bear the brunt of these impacts, potentially intensifying tensions between provincial and federal governments. An economic downturn could also drive inflation higher, further complicating Canada's fiscal outlook. Politically, restricting oil exports could escalate tensions between Canada and the US, straining diplomatic ties and undermining the USMCA trade agreement. This could provoke countermeasures from Washington, exacerbating the trade dispute and diminishing prospects for a negotiated resolution. Canada's potential decision to limit electricity exports to the US carries major economic and consumer implications, emphasizing the interconnected nature of the two nations' energy markets. Canada remains one of the largest electricity suppliers to the US, with exports facilitated through an integrated grid system. Any disruption to this network would have widespread consequences, impacting multiple sectors of the US economy. Electricity imports from Canada are essential for grid stability and meeting demand in regions such as the Midwest and Northeast. A reduction or halt in these exports could lead to severe supply shortages, forcing the US to rely on more expensive domestic or alternative sources, driving up electricity prices. This increase in energy costs would impact industries that depend on affordable power, including manufacturing, agriculture, and technology, potentially hampering productivity and economic growth. Additionally, disruptions in Canadian electricity imports would exacerbate existing US energy challenges, such as outdated infrastructure and seasonal demand fluctuations. States like New York, Minnesota, and Michigan, which rely heavily on Canadian electricity, could experience power shortages and surging costs. This would likely slow economic activity, reduce investment, and heighten the risk of job losses in industries requiring stable, low-cost energy. On a broader scale, trade disruptions could strain US-Canada relations, forcing the US to seek alternative energy arrangements and triggering further retaliatory actions. Given that total bilateral trade between the two nations reached approximately $1.1 trillion in 2023, prolonged escalations could jeopardize long-term economic cooperation and mutual benefits. For American consumers, rising electricity costs could lead to higher household energy bills, adding financial strain for families already grappling with inflation and high living expenses. These increases would be particularly burdensome during peak seasons, such as summer and winter, when energy consumption spikes. Furthermore, limited access to Canadian electricity could lead to greater grid instability and an increased likelihood of power outages, disrupting essential services and everyday life. In extreme cases, energy shortages could heighten public health risks, especially during harsh weather conditions when stable electricity supply is crucial for heating and cooling. The ripple effects on consumer goods and services would also be significant. Higher electricity costs would inevitably translate to increased production costs across industries, from food processing to industrial manufacturing, further eroding consumer purchasing power and potentially slowing overall economic activity.